Burlesque Stripped Down, episode number 53. Welcome back, friends and lovers, once again to another episode of Burlesque Stripped Down. This is Velvet Eau Claire. As always, I am your guide through all of the saucy, sexy, sassy, and very often not so sexy secrets of us, the ladies, gents, and non-binary folk behind the tassels. Now, we are, like I said, smack dab in the middle of the season O sex, so we are talking about everything that is related to sexuality and burlesque and art and creativity and sometimes politics. We're not really talking too much about politics because, let's be real, we could probably have a whole show just about that with the current political climate having to do with sexuality and things like that. But I digress. In any case, today I am super excited. This is actually one of the interviews I was most looking forward to over the last few months, and probably one of the ones I really enjoyed editing the most. I mean, all of my guests are wonderful, don't get me wrong, but listening back to my episode with my guest today was just a real, was almost better than, recording in the first place, because I really got to sit and listen and kind of absorb some of that. So Sinclair Sexsmith is a fantastic person to get to know. I first heard about them, I believe it was on Sex Gets Real with Dawn Sarah, which is another fantastic podcast. If you have an opportunity and you're interested in sexuality and inclusivity and all of these things, I would highly recommend you checking it out. Of course, I'll put a link in the show notes to that. But I first heard Sinclair over on that, talking about power dynamics and really kind of unpacking a lot of the things that go along with that. So it was a fantastic episode there. And then I can't remember if that was before or after I had realized that I was actually going to Sex Down South and that Sinclair would be there giving one of the keynote speeches. So it was great. Sinclair and I had already been emailing, but we got a chance to meet in person. We even chatted over cocktails a bit, which was wonderful and just such a fantastic person to get to know. Made me even more excited to jump on the mic with them. So before I jump into telling you a little bit more about Sinclair, as always, a couple reminder announcements. Depending on if you've been listening before, I do have a couple ways that you can help support the show, which would be immensely appreciated on my part. If you're interested in helping out financially and getting a little sneak peek at some exclusive photo sets, you can head over to burlesquestrippeddown.com/support, and that's going to take you directly to my Patreon page. Just today, actually, I posted a new exclusive photo that I just got back from my photographer that's not posted anywhere else, and it's only for my patrons there. And I'm looking to start as well kind of asking for feedback from the show as we start to have different guests and bigger guests and things like that. I'm going to be interacting with my patrons and kind of crowdsourcing some questions and things like that as well. So you can head over to burlesquestrippeddown.com/support and you can see all the different perk levels. Even $1 a month would be just fantastic. We're getting close to my first goal, which is to be able to pay my audio hosting fees each month, because each month I shell out Libsyn. I give Libsyn some money in order to host these media files so that they can be downloaded to your device. And it's not super expensive, but it would be nice to have that off my plate every month. So I can start focusing on doing some other things. So if you're able to help out financially, that would be a wonderful thing. If you'd like to help out with some time, if you're interested in kind of contributing to the cause, I'm really planning on focusing in 2017 about creating this community of burlesque performers and burlesque enthusiasts here at Burlesque Stripped Down. So if you're interested in being a part of that and contributing whatever you can, whether it's a few hours a week or a few hours a month even, just to help me share and get the word out there kind of as an ambassador, or if you're looking at even, a few hours a week, 5 hours a week, something like that to really contribute whatever skills you have. You can also go to burlesquestrippeddown.com/join the posse. And there you'll be taken to it's just a little form so I can kind of get to know you a little bit, see what areas you might be able to help me out in, all of those kind of things. So if you are interested, I would love to hear from you and talk about how we can kind of work together and what all these things that we can create together. If you'd like to contribute your words, I would love to hear what you think of the show. You can do that easily through an email. You can just send me an email if you'd like, but even better would be to head over to iTunes or really whatever preferred podcast player you use, but iTunes is one of the biggest ones, and that's where they have kind of the search algorithms and all of this. But if you can leave a rating and review for this show, even just a couple thoughts on what you like about it and everything like that, that would be immensely helpful for me. As I said, we're trying to kind of get in front of, as I've said many times, we're trying to get in front of more ears, into more ears. And so the more reviews and ratings that we have, the higher up in those search rankings will come and the more people will be able to find us. So that would be wonderful as well. And you can find that just through iTunes. If you search our show on iTunes, which doesn't even have to be, you don't even have to do it like have iTunes downloaded. I don't believe. I think you can just go to the website. Or if you're an iPerson, you can do all those things. I'm an Android girl myself, so I don't really know about these things, but and lastly, of course, even if you just have 2 seconds to hit the share button, if you're listening to this on the website, there's an easy share button right there, or on Facebook, whatever works easiest for you. Just share this with a couple friends that you know might love this show, whether they're burlesque performers, burlesque enthusiasts, art enthusiasts, or just really into sex. Like, who's not really? I think pretty much most of us allosexuals are pretty into sex, so that'll cover that. Everybody could stand to learn a little bit more about sex and sexuality and all of these things. Now, let me tell you just a little bit. I mentioned how I met Sinclair, but let me tell you a little bit about them and their career. Sinclair Sexsmith, who uses they and them pronouns, is a genderqueer, kinky butch writer who teaches and performs, whose work studies power dynamics and identity theory. Since 2006, they have produced the award-winning site Sugar Butch Chronicles at sugarbutch.net, which is recognized numerous places as one of the top sex blogs. Their full-length collection of short stories, Sweet and Rough, Queer Kink Erotica, is a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award in the erotica category. And in 2016, they were awarded the National Leather Association John Preston Short Story Award. Sinclair lives in Oakland with their boy. So this is a very interesting episode because we definitely go different ways, I think, than either one of us expected to go, but it's fantastic to really unpack kind of what Sinclair is really currently personally invested in and personally studying, as well as some of the history and some advice that they have for those of us who are maybe newer on the journeys or telling our own stories in whatever form that comes up. So without further ado, let me go ahead and jump in to my interview with Sinclair. Yes, that's right, my friends. I do have Sinclair Sexsmith with me here today. How are you doing, Sinclair?
I'm great. I'm so excited to talk to you. How are you doing?
Oh man, I am doing good too. I am super excited for this. I know we had a pesky hurricane that kind of got in the way once when we tried to record and all of these things. So it's great to jump on the mic with you. It was so wonderful. I'm sure my listeners are tired of hearing this because I've had so many guests from Sex Down South, but it was just such a fab conference and I was so excited to meet you there. It was really great to hear your thoughts and get to talk to you on a one-on-one basis.
Thank you. Yeah, it really was a fabulous conference. I wasn't sure what to expect because I hadn't been there before, but yeah, I was really impressed with the way it was run and with all of the workshops that I attended.
Yeah, it was really, it was great. Like the topics, the variety of topics that were there, the variety of people that were there, and just that I really felt safe. It was just such a welcoming and safe atmosphere, I felt.
Yeah, I think so too.
They did a nice job. And I'm always encouraging all my listeners to go, check it out for next year because we can make it even bigger next year.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit, I mentioned your bio in kind of that intro. So why don't you just kind of take a second, fill in any gaps from the bio. Tell us about, who Sinclair is as a person deep down.
As a deep down person?
Yes, they were going to get in deep real quick.
Okay. Well, I think primarily I'm a really, how do we even start with the deep down? I think in the deep down, I'm a writer. And that has been driving most of what I've done and most of the ways that I pursue life in general. And I'm queer and non-binary and a masculine presenting. There's lots of different words for that kind of identity, but I tend to use the word butch. Yeah. But there's, again, lots of words for that.
Absolutely.
I think those things really are primarily what inform both my work and my drive. So it took me a long time to kind of come to some of these identities because as a kid growing up in Alaska in the 80s, I did not have very many models for this kind of thing.
I imagine.
So I really eagerly moved to what we call the lower 48 and pursued representation and other kinds of just trying to figure out, like, what am I missing here? Because I knew there was something that I was seeking, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. And I think I've been a seeker for a lot for a long time in a lot of different areas. Lately, I've been really seeking health and kind of health as a spiritual practice, and I have things to say about that. Before that, it was kind of more like the gender and kink and sexuality realms that were a big puzzle to me, and really seeking that. So that's where the Sugar Butch project came in, where I was like, wait, what is this relationship thing? How do I have a good one? I want to have sex for a long time. Like, how do I maintain sex in a relationship? How do I know how to pick a good person to be with? And I started really recording my journey trying to do that, which is where Sugar Butch started.
That's amazing, too, to be able to have that kind of record, not only to be putting it out in the world, but just to have it of your journey. I imagine it's interesting to kind of look back on that.
Absolutely. And, half of it is probably deleted at this point because it's, many personal things that I just don't need to be out there in my history as well. And things that, and things that I regret doing and things that I shouldn't have probably posted and stuff that's mostly just too personal. And it's morphed a lot over the years, and lately it's a lot more of a place for kink and sexuality theory and identity theory than it is about like finding myself or finding, my own personal journal entries. It's not so much about that, but I still really love engaging through those media, through all of the, social media and blog and writing. And I turn to it frequently when I'm trying to figure things out. So it's still a really useful space. But I also launched a Patreon, which has really helped. And all of my writing is funneled through there now. So like I'm writing in lots of different places online. And if somebody wanted to follow me and figure out where they all were, that's the best place to do it.
That's awesome. I love what Patreon has done for artists in all different realms. It's just such a fantastic way that people, instead of just having like a donate button, going to PayPal on your website, they can actually, go for those of you listening who aren't familiar. It's just a platform where people can go and support the artists that they love by, pledging a certain amount financially every month and get, there's exclusive perks and all those things as well. But it's just such a nice way to show that kind of support on a different level.
Absolutely. And people get to like see behind the curtain a little bit and different levels of pledging. Different artists make different kind of give backs and gifts back to the Patreons depending on what dollar amount they're supporting. And it's been fun. It's been fun to like give a lot of my work away because I don't feel like I have to make sure to get paid for it in the same way because I have some steady money from Patreon. One of the first things I did was remove all the advertisements from my website because I was like, if you guys want to pay a little bit of this is about what I make on ads. So as soon as I make that, I'm just going to say, never mind.
Nice.
And they're ugly. They clutter up the site anyway most of the time. For sure. So I just took all that down and then we did a big redesign and that helped things too, just to make it cleaner. And it's tricky when I have, when someone has 10 years of writing archives like I do, it's hard to make those archives accessible to people so that they can actually go through and like dig in the back of it instead of just going, oh, there's not been an update for a month. I guess there's nothing to do here. So we've played a lot with formatting as well for trying to make those things more accessible.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think about it from like a podcasting standpoint or even just from a podcast listener standpoint. I found a new podcast that I really, really enjoy, but they have such a backlog of archives. I'm just like, you know what? I can't even do it. And I just start with the new ones that come out, and if there isn't like a good website in place that really kind of recycles that content well, it can be almost like a waste. It can be a wasted opportunity, really.
Definitely. And when someone gets really into something, catching year 10 on this show, the conversation that I've been working with for a long time really misses a lot of it. Yeah. So how to fill that stuff in for new readers, and then how to get people, how to keep, bringing new folks along and staying relevant too. That not, I don't want to have the same conversations. I'm not pursuing those same questions anymore. So I'm working with new topics and new and interesting things.
Love it. So speaking of that, I mean, what do you have kind of what, you mentioned kind of recently you've been focusing a lot on health and health as a spiritual practice. What's kind of lighting your fire lately? What do you have going on that you're most excited about?
Yeah, health things are more of my personal journey and where I'm at trying to really figure out some of the puzzles and some of the things that are a struggle with my body. But like through my work, mostly I'm really focused on power dynamics and on authority exchange relationships. So I'm writing a column for Autostraddle called View from the Top, which has been going along most of 2016. Yeah, almost. It started, I think, in February. So it's been almost a year now. And it's been great. There's so much conversation there. I mean, that's a very dynamic website where there's a lot going on and a lot of commentary all the time. So I've had some good conversations coming out of those articles. And so since it's View from the Top, it's really about my personal journey, moving toward being a dominant and what that means from like a feminist, queer, butch perspective. And, so that stuff has been really tricky to unpack. In some ways, I feel like it's the whole 10-year archive, but just in like the distilled version, because it's, I was retelling some of the stories that I've told before, but this is more succinct and more, and more well thought out too, because some of those were at the time, I'm just going like, I don't know what I'm doing. But then later I'm like, oh, that's what I was doing. So there's more reflection built in, of course.
Well, that's a good, it's a good point too, that anybody who creates content, which I think a lot of us do, even if we're, even just performers, a lot of us create content online as well. And we talked about, like last week with Taomi as well, there's a way to repurpose the content, not just the content itself, but those stories, right? Just because you've told them once before doesn't mean that you can't go to a new platform where there's a whole new audience and tell them again in different ways. And again, like you said, more succinct. And even if it's the same people reading both of them, it's going to have a different vibe because you're going to be telling it differently.
Absolutely. Well, and I think about too the kind of pyramid of interest in any given subject. So, sexuality, queer sexuality, say, there are so many more people at a beginner level than there are at intermediate or advanced levels of those topics. So like any sort of intro post around kink up your sex life and how do I get my girlfriend to, do more kinky things with me is going to reach way more people than someone going, I need to learn how to do fire play with someone who has a chronic injury, like that's really specific and very advanced work. But it's not going to apply to most of the folks who are listening.
Absolutely. So it's about kind of finding that balance, talking about and still kind of addressing those things with some people, but then also finding those media where you can, try to talk more to the masses.
The other thing that's interesting about content creators and like the kind of merging of content creators and artists and also the personal life journaling and like personal study is I think there's a lot of value in sharing one's own experiences online or offline or through art or whatever it is, right? Like a lot of us, that's kind of the source material for all of this. It's like where we came from and what we've learned. But it becomes really tricky when your source material is yourself and you're studying this one particular thing. Like let's say someone's really struggling with body shame and just feeling really lousy about their body and about their embodiment. I have found burlesque and like dance in general an expression of embodiment and a way to work through body shame in this huge way.
Absolutely.
But like once someone kind of goes, okay, I'm not really struggling with that anymore. Like that's not my edge anymore. I can see how sometimes those things get a little dulled. So for me, like my edge was sexuality, gender, kink. And I feel like, okay, like check. I mean, I'm not done. I'm going to learn that forever, but I have to separate my personal stuff and where I am personally growing and working on that edge of sexuality, gender, kink. And then also like where my brand now is and how to keep talking about those things to people in a way that's useful and not boring to me. Because I don't want to write the 101 posts over and over and over again, but that's what people ask me often.
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but it makes a lot of sense. I think of, like, for example, like Dan Savage, right? Who's been, doing these advice columns for, God, what is he? I don't even know. Like a long time.
Like 20 years?
Yeah. It's got to be like that, and I listen to his podcast and sometimes I hear these questions and I've only been listening for like a year or so and already I hear repeats of questions and things. And I can just imagine how repetitious that must get for him, to kind of answer these same questions all the time. So what do what are your strategies for that? And do you suggest that somebody who's kind of still building their brand kind of think about that ahead of time? Or do you think that's just a transition you have to make after all this time?
I think part of it is a particular problem with people who are explicitly telling their story, their personal story, which, you know, as a like personal sex blogger, that's what I was doing, right? I was writing about my life. You know, Dan Savage, his brand, his style is to tell, you know, to answer advice questions.
True.
So, and he has learned over the years, as problematic as Dan Savage is, he has changed some of his, you know, opinions and accounts over the years. So like, it's, you know, but it's not his story. He's not telling his story through the advice column. I would say his books are telling his story, you know, the way when he's published books. It's like when my boyfriend and I decided to get pregnant, and, you know, what it's like to raise a kid and what it's like to be a gay dad and stuff like that. So it's much more about his personal life, and he's made that distinction. Like the advice columns are about his community and the knowledge that he has, but the books are his personal kind of story that he's putting out in the world. So I guess that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like I got, at least that's one of the things that I've learned from doing Sugar Butch for 10 years, was that my personal narrative got really caught up with what then kind of accidentally became a brand. I mean, when I started in 2006, blogs were not the thing that they are now. People weren't aiming to like become a professional blogger. That wasn't even really in the vernacular. And I'd been writing online since 1996, but it had never been professionally. It was always community-based writing to meet other people and to share stories. So it got really muddled when my personal stuff became my brand stuff. So I don't know if I have advice exactly for people thinking about this, just that like, when you're building a brand, make it flexible enough so that it can encompass all your interests as they change. Maybe that would be the advice.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I think, I mean, granted, we're probably speaking here to a specific subset of, you know, of burlesque performers, but I think that I've noticed as I talk to more and more performers that there is kind of this underlying uncertainty about how to establish themselves and how personal to get, especially with things like social media. A lot of people that come to the shows and become fans of given performers, they want to know more about them, like personally. And I've heard people, you know, kind of being interested in kind of telling their story, their journey as a performer and all these things. But there's, especially because it's so tied in with sex, as is your work, you know, it's tough because how far do you go, either for safety or for anonymity or for, you know, personal comfort, that kind of sake. And B, exactly like you said, to keep everything flexible so that as you grow and change, if you don't feel that way anymore, if you don't want to pursue those topics anymore, you can still keep that brand going or still keep some of that audience that you've created.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one of the reasons to build a brand under like a pen name or a performer name or a, you know, whatever kind of nom de plume, nom de guerre. So my writing group corrected me. They said there's no such thing as a nom de plume. Actually, you have to say nom de guerre, which is name of war.
Yeah.
So it's like your real, you know, and I think about it very metaphorically, like how I'm waging war against the ignorance, or how I'm waging war against the like, where I'm, you know, inserting the work into the culture. Anyway, but so I think that's one of the important reasons to have like an umbrella name that then could be anything underneath it, right? Like Sinclair Sexsmith, while that, maybe it's not obvious, but it's not my name at birth.
Nor is Velvet Eau Claire my name at birth. I know, right? We're shattering all these preconceptions now, but turns out.
Spoiler warning. Exactly. But it is tricky to it is kind of a porn name, right? Like both of ours actually had that kind of like, you know, slightly burlesque, slightly performery, slightly sexy, and so it's harder for me as I've been writing more theory or gender theory or the health pieces I've been writing this year, a couple of which were published. It feels a little bit like, is this really still the name I'm going to use for this? So that's one thing that I'm thinking about in retrospect too, is like, I'm glad I had made another name, but then is it big enough, or is it kind of, I don't know, professional enough to grow with me as I'm exploring new arenas? I mean, I'm always going to talk frankly about sex, and I'm always going to talk openly about kink and the ways that that intersects with all these other things too, right? Like health and sexual violence or like assault or surviving, you know, all of those things are relevant to me. So like to leave sex or kink out of any of those conversations would be a lack.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about, I mean, I'd love to hear you kind of expand on some of the things that you've been exploring related to health, especially how they relate to things like sexuality and even performing as an artist. But specifically, just any big takeaways that you've had over the last, you know, year or so that you've been really studying this deeply?
Yeah, well, I'd say the last year I've been writing deeply, but it's been about like 6 or 7 years that I've been in a big study about this. And part of it started with a more in-depth spiritual practice, which really believes that the body is, you know, our own temple, and so to speak, to treat the body as a spiritual practice, to treat health as a spiritual practice. So to really pay attention to what's going on in the body, work on embodiment, and then get in touch with all these body systems. So really, it was maybe 6-7 years ago where I started going, you know, I feel kind of crappy all the time. And that was kind of the start of it all. Like, wow, as I'm getting more and more embodied, I feel tired. I'm really sore. I just don't feel right. What's going on? And it's taken me a long time to try to pinpoint some of those. So again, with the personal journey stuff, a lot of this has been my own personal journey and things that I'm learning through trying to pursue, you know, the health of my body. All of my, allopathic, as in like regular doctor medicine, Western medicine style tests come back totally neutral to them. They all say, yeah, everything's fine. No, you're good. You know, come see us in a year or 2 years or if something's wrong. But meanwhile, I'm going, but something's wrong. You know, so how do I figure out what that is when you're telling me everything's fine? So I've been seeing all sorts of other practitioners. And at this point, I'd say I have like a health team of multiple people that are helping me work on this from different angles. And sometimes their material talks to each other, and sometimes I, you know, give material from one to another, or sometimes not. And it, you know, a lot of it for me has stemmed also around having really heavy periods and really heavy bleeding, like lots of blood and lots of pain in the period. So when I go into allopathic medicine to see my like OBGYN or something, as soon as I say that, they say, okay, well, let's put you on the pill. And I say, well, I don't want hormones in my body. Like those hormones are primarily estrogen and progesterone. I'm a masculine queer. Can you tell me what those will do to me? And they're like, yeah, no, we don't really know what that's going to do. But it'll probably, you know, change the balance of your hormones. And because of certain masculine characteristics that I have, like I grow a little goatee, for example, they're like, yeah, those things will probably change. I'm like, yeah, I don't know I don't want to just be like, oh, maybe that will change and maybe not. I don't know. So for years I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go on that kind of hormonal birth control. And they just had no idea how to interact with me. Anytime I brought up those kind of concerns, they'd kind of be like, well, that's the only option. Sorry. Okay. See you next. You know, one nurse said, have you tried taking aspirin? I was like, are you kidding me?
Thank you for that fantastic advice.
You must never have a bad period in your life because obviously I have tried. I mean, I'm taking a bottle of Aleve through my 6 days of bleeding. Like that's not healthy for me. You know?
No, for sure.
So that was a part of it too. When my sister went to nursing school, whatever, and she started going, you know, I don't think you're actually supposed to take that much. Like that's probably causing some issues. Oh, man. You know, so many of these things are now intersecting. It kind of started with that investigation. What's going on there? I started working with a practitioner in the Justice method, which is based out of Canada. It's a way to like chart your cycle, your cervical mucus, and your body temperature to tell you what your cycle's doing and figure out what is off in your body, basically. The practitioner I worked with, she would say the cycle is the canary in the coal mine. So when something goes wrong, the canary is the first thing that goes. And so the cycle, if anything's going on in the body's like, hey, no way, we're not going to get pregnant. Let's screw that up a little bit so that because we're not in a state to make another life right now.
Oh, that's
like the first thing that gets really screwed up. And I'm sure that's not true for everybody, but that was true in my case anyway. And so we started measuring vitamin levels and mineral levels and figuring out what kind of hormonal imbalance was going on and how to work with it in natural ways instead of just taking birth control. Or I was like, maybe birth control is my only option. So that's okay too. If really I know what's going on and that's really the thing that's going to fix it, I'm willing to make those sacrifices. But I want to know that I don't just need to eat more bananas. Like what else are my options here?
Right.
So that's a small nutshell version. I have a piece in the book that just came out called The Remedy, which is queer and trans stories about healthcare.
Oh, cool.
Something like that. And edited by Zena Sharman. And so more in depth of that particular story is in that book. And it's been really valuable to write about and really valuable to share also because I've heard from a lot of people who have said, oh my God, I have this problem too. And, I ended up getting a hysterectomy or something, ended up just doing something dramatic that was like, never mind, like, let's just cancel this problem. But those kind of things, again, don't necessarily address some of the underlying things. So I was really curious. And the more I keep digging, the more I find.
Yeah. It's just shocking to me still, even though like I've been on this earth for several decades. But when I was a kid, you just trust your doctor. Your doctor knows what they're talking about. You listen to them, they know the deal, and you go from there. And then in my 20s, like I kind of just like, I didn't have health insurance for most of my I still don't actually.
I didn't either.
And so I just didn't really think about it. I didn't really think about doctors. I didn't think about anything. Like, I guess I would have trusted them if they told me something, but I didn't really ever think about it. And now as I start to be like, okay, I should probably get insurance. I should probably start, I had been, going to Planned Parenthood a couple times, doing all these things like to make sure that I'm okay. But like, I start to realize, oh, no, doctors really have no idea what's going on half the time. I'm not condemning doctors. All right. They're okay. But there's so much missing, especially for those of us who live any sort of alternative lifestyle, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Western medicine is really good at some things. Like letting people not die, and
that's a good thing.
Mending broken bones, like the big stuff. It's like something's wrong, bam, but they're not so good at the really subtlety things that are in the body. I mean, a lot of what's been going on with me is now coming down to a bunch of different food practices that I've been doing. And a lot of it is probably about food allergies that are very low level. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest symptoms of a food allergy, for example, is congestion after eating. And I have had chronic congestion for years, so I'm finally going, oh, okay. So this is related to all the other things.
Interesting. And see, that's something that I've never heard before. And, and of course, for me, I'm pretty sure that there is some level of lactose intolerance for me, but I just don't care because I love milk so much. It's like my favorite thing ever. And so it's not an extreme lactose intolerance, but it's to the point where I'm just like, la, 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 la. I don't want to know. I don't want to know about that one. But,
I think
who knows what it's doing to me.
Right, and so it might actually be screwing things up underneath, even though you're like, well, I'll be constipated or I'll be, have to blow my nose a little bit extra, but that's okay. And there's times that I'm totally willing to do that too. I also have a bit of a dairy allergy, and it's funny, after years and years of being a vegetarian, it was like 16 years that I was 17 years I was a vegetarian. That was also the first thing people started saying when I started at first complaining, like, I'm just not feeling well and I don't feel right. Something's up. The doctors would say, well, obviously you're not getting enough protein. You need to eat meat. And finally I was just like, okay, fuck it. Like, let's just put meat back in my diet so that you can't say that that's wrong. So that that's not the reason anymore. I mean, maybe that is the reason. And if this fixes it, I'll eat some chicken sometimes. Great. But if it's not the reason, like, let's look a little bit deeper.
Oh my gosh. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because isn't that true that I feel like that is one of the problems with not just Western medicine, but just like our society, mainstream society in general, is that there's these tropes that are so easy for them to come to and blame. Like, oh, vegetarians just need more protein. Oh, we just need to lose weight. Oh, this. Oh, that.
I was going to bring that one up too, the fat thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Get into that one. Yeah, because that's something we can go on and on about, right?
Absolutely. And I have had doctors throughout this process say, that I would, if I just lost weight, then it would be better. Yeah. And, usually they're not doctors I go see again.
Right.
I went in and saw a dermatologist, yet another one of these issues, interconnected issues. And he said, well, I think what you need to do is take baths in bleach. And I was like, Excuse me?
Oh my
Are you
God.
kidding? So, like, it's amazing. I mean, he was, you know, obviously not 100% bleach, but a small amount of bleach in the tub.
Right.
But I was just like, okay. But like you, I come from a place where doctors are right. So when I went in going like, and they were like, everything's okay. For a while, I was just like, oh, all right. That must be in my head. But as I got deeper into this embodiment practice, I was like, no, my body knows stuff about this. Like my body knows something's going on here and I need to figure out what it is. And if it means I can't eat dairy anymore, I actually think I'd rather be healthy than eat dairy.
Oh, yeah, I'm still trying to come to terms with that might be the case for me because I just love milk like you would not believe. And so I hear you, but
and it's interesting. Well, I actually think we should talk about more sexy things, but I have many things to say about all of that stuff.
We can talk about lactose intolerance all day. Nothing wrong with that. I'm sure that's why everybody pressed play today.
Definitely, they were tuning in for our personal food allergies.
All right, fine.
But how do mushrooms sit with you? What about nightshades? How about that?
Yeah, right. You know. Let's talk about all these things. But no, I think it is really interesting, and it does kind of come into play for everybody, right? I'm not sure the exact connection to burlesque, but I'm sure there is one. It's fine.
Well, you know what I think a lot of it is embodiment. It's about being in touch and in tune with our bodies. And that's really true in the like sex, queer, kinky worlds that I, you know, which is more my background rather than burlesque.
Sure.
That's true there too. Like a lot of those studies and a lot of the ways when people dive in and start learning about themselves through these communities, it's about how do I feel better in my body? How do I feel good? You know, how do I feel loved and lovable with my partner? How do I get the kind of touch and sex that I desire? How do I feel comfortable in my own skin when I'm, you know, genderqueer or trans or non-binary in some form? And same with, I think it's very similar with burlesque. How do I show my amazing badassness through, you know, dance, costume, movement, and be like fully in my body?
Absolutely. I mean, I had an interview earlier in the season of Sex with Virginia Dare Me, who she's a new burlesque performer, but she's been a singer-songwriter for many years. And she was talking about some of her sexual trauma in the past and how burlesque has been a tool for her to kind of work through a lot of that. And actually that brings up, that was actually a perfect transition. Thank you. Because that brings up one thing I wanted to mention was something that you said when you were talking with Dawn Sarah on the Sex Gets Real podcast. And that was, you said you were interested in the ways that women and other marginalized folks hold trauma in their bodies and the way that we use sex and sensation to move it out and heal. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? Because I love that idea of how we hold that trauma and then use sex and sensation to move through it.
I think that those ideas also come from the same kind of spiritual practices that I'm pursuing. And the idea that we store experiences, memories, feelings, whatever in our bodies, I think is widely held by many embodied practices, right? Like yoga and Tai Chi and various forms of dance would say that that's true too, that you could kind of, or like massage, right? Like sometimes I always think of the example of being on a massage table and somebody's really working at your shoulder or your glutes or something. And then all of a sudden some memory comes or like some feeling just gets flooded. Like, oh, I have no idea why I just got really, really angry or really flooded with fear or really flooded with sadness. And if someone can kind of relax into that touch, there's a way for that and just like feel into the feeling. There's a way for it to kind of manifest, like remanifest and move out of the body. And it sounds a little woo when I try to explain it.
No, it makes sense.
But I have had a lot of experiences with this too in embodiment workshops, and that is part of why I really trust it and believe it. And I don't think people should just, you know, be like, oh, well, somebody said that's true, so it is true. I think people should try this out in their own body and see what it's like. And so I think one of the reasons we use kink and extreme kind of states of sensation and, I don't know, stimulation in various ways is to enliven those places in our bodies that sometimes get a little stuck or stagnant, and to help those things move through and get released.
Yes. Oh, I agree. I agree fully. And I think that you make a good point that this is something that, you kind of need to try to experience, or not even try. I'm not saying it should be like a conscious necessarily effort, but exposing yourself to these situations where that type of transformation or that type of sensation can be possible, whether it's through something like burlesque or dance or or something like more extreme like kink or whatever it is, or even just like you said, a massage. It's a great example because it's something that's kind of very easy. I think we can all go out and get a massage. I think we're okay with that, right? And then it just kind of it has the opportunity to release some of those sensations.
Definitely the body practices I'm so curious about, so many of them, and how we still keep trusting in the wisdom of our own bodies, how we can really go in there and go, even though all my doctors say I'm fine, something feels off in my stomach, so I need to find a doctor or a practitioner who will work with me about that, or whatever it is. Trusting our own body's reality is a huge radical act, is an important radical act. I think that's true for, queers, for genderqueer folks who are going like, no, that's not my gender. That's not the thing I fit into. I think it's true for survivors, folks who have had some sort of assault or sexual violence in the past. Often there's a lot of gaslighting there and a lot of like, no, that wasn't really what happened, but wait, but I think it was. And how do we trust our bodies to know that truth was actually real? The body's truth is real. So I think that's at the root of a lot of these pursuits that I'm interested in.
Do you have any advice for people who might kind of not be sure how to be in touch with their bodies? Maybe they've gotten so far away from that. What kind of things can we do to kind of come back and be able to learn to listen to our body better?
That's a great question. A day-to-day movement practice I think is amazing. Just like finding 5 minutes to stretch and just be quiet. And stretch, movement practice, stretch, I kind of mean anything. Like if someone just starts from standing still and then follows like, what do I want to move right now? How do I want to like stretch my arms back? Do I want to like fall forward and do a forward bend? Do I want to sit on the floor and, stretch my legs? Like what does my body want? Like just listening to that for 5 minutes would be a great first step. And then practices like yoga and practices like dance or embodied dance can have more guidance into feeling into those parts of body. I think the work that I do is through and with Body Trust. So that website is bodytrustcircle.com, and we have a newsletter and a podcast also.
Oh, cool.
Monthly on the podcast, we have what we call the Try This at Home segment, where we encourage just one little experiment to try at home. And so that might be a place people could start too, of like some beginner embody exercises.
I love that. That's a great idea. And just for everybody listening, as always, if you've listened to the show before, you know that I always have a show notes page for every episode. So if you're interested in any of the things that we're talking about here today, you can go to burlesquestripdown.com/Sinclair. That's SINCLAIR. So not like my last name, but CLAIR. And you'll be able to get all the links there, as well as how to get in touch with Sinclair and all that good stuff. But to bring it back, I love what you first said in the beginning is so important. That's something I really need to take in for myself as well, is just this idea of just moving how my body wants to and just letting my body do what it needs to do. To me, it kind of mirrors my my meditation practice, actually, which I've been doing more with the mind. And so there's an aspect of the body included in most meditation practice, some sort of like body scan or taking stock of your body and things like that, at least kind of to get an idea. But then you often kind of let your mind just do what it needs to do, without judgment, without agenda, without anything like that. And so many of us have gotten, because meditation is like a very in vogue kind of a thing to be doing. So many of us have gotten to that point, perhaps with our mind, but rarely, if ever, do I just let my body do what it needs to do. That idea is so foreign to me. Either I'm moving to, get somewhere to do something, or, for my burlesque performances to rehearse those specific moves. Or maybe if I'm coming up with a new number or something, I'll let myself go with the music. But rarely do I just allow it to be and to do what it wants. That's just an interesting point you made.
Thank you. Well, and I think even as you're describing that, I'm going, that's kind of intimidating. How are we going to do that? But I think when I just put on a timer for 5 minutes, you know, I'm like, okay, I can do anything for 5 minutes. I can do it. I can do this just for a few minutes. And I don't know, maybe I'll just sit there the whole time or stand or go like, I'm not feeling, I need to lie on the floor and just like relax or whatever. But I also think that it doesn't have to be huge, big things. You know, often stretching, we think, oh, we're going to like go to the edge and we're going to push and we're going to, But like the smallest little movements can put our body back in alignment and can help connect us with the pieces that we lose sight of or lose feel of. Our bodies change so much, you know, not just with our own life experiences and, you know, weight up and down and whatever, like style, but also the cells regenerating all the time. So like to feel into that all the time, I feel like is really important.
I think that's great advice, especially, well, really for anyone, but especially, you know, for those of us we use our bodies a lot. But I find sometimes, you know, I've chatted with other, you know, while rehearsing or while being with other burlesque performers, it's hard to be really in tune with our bodies, to know what our body needs and to know how it needs to move, how it wants to move, and how to best express some of these things. Because of course, for most of us, when we're on stage, we're trying to invoke an emotion, right? Or evoke an emotion rather from the audience. You know, we're trying to get some feeling out there, even if it's humor or whatever it is. And so how to best use our bodies to be able to achieve that is an interesting probably.
Right, because the body so much is the medium in burlesque. Like that's the canvas, that's the, you know, the paint, that's the thing we're working with. And it's similar in this particular spiritual pursuit, which is probably why we're spending most of this conversation talking about that, because that is really where the burlesque overlap is for me. And this health stuff is like my edgy place right now. So that's the investigative edge and the body. When I started figuring out better that my body is the practice and is the temple, is the thing I'm tending to on a day-to-day basis, it made more sense to listen of like, what's happening in that shoulder right now and how can I just kind of move it just a little more, and like what's happening in that hip and how do I, you know, what kind of touch do I want? What kind of touch am I craving or would my body like right now? Asking those simple questions, I feel like has really changed my dynamic and my relationship with my embodiment.
That's great work to be doing. And I think that you're right. Just kind of starting with these small little steps on a daily basis and then doing things like yoga and maybe even trying some of your try this at home thing advice as well. That'd be great.
Body Trust does retreats and workshops and classes and stuff too, which is mostly, I've been working with these folks for some of them for 15, 17 years now. And Body Trust, all the four of us together have been working together for about 10 years. And the in-person classes are really where I learned most of that. Really, you know, being able to feel into here's what happens if we put touch there and apply touch and with the intention of release, you know, let's see what happens. And here's what happens when we spend the morning, you know, moving the way our bodies want to move. For example, at our long form retreat, we usually have half an hour of movement and then half an hour of meditation every morning, partly because in this practice, movement or the yoga of it is meant to limber up the body so that one can sit in meditation longer. They're not intended to be separate, really.
That's interesting. I'm definitely going to link up all of that so that hopefully, I mean, are there a lot of retreats throughout the year or like kind of all over the country, or how does that work?
No, they're not. There are not a lot. There's a few. And I can, but it's best to just go to Body Trust Circle and the website and get on the list, and we'll let you know when the retreats are. There's one advanced retreat that's annual, that's solid, and then we occasionally have beginner retreats, mostly for women or for women and genderqueer trans folks. We don't have cis men on staff right now, so we have not been running men's retreats, but that is another place that we are pursuing. And the intro level one's called Dedicated to Your Body, and it's really about a lot of these practices. It's about feeling into it and figuring out what your body is saying. I believe there's going to be one of those in Seattle this year, but I don't know how many. Might just be one.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll get all the links for that so that we can kind of find out more. But I think you make a good point about just like those in-person, you know, retreats, whether it's through something like Body Trust or if it's, you know, another organization that you can find, just some way to kind of do that work in person instead of just by yourself. I think that's a good point too.
Yeah, I felt like it was impossible to learn embodiment things from a book. And I learn everything from books, but I could not learn that from a book, and I couldn't learn meditation from a book either. I tried for years, thinking that I just couldn't get it. What is this meditation thing? I finally went to a meditation classes and retreat, and I was like, boom, oh, now I get it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So as an artist, and because you are definitely an artistic entrepreneur, you're a creative professional, you're a writer, all of these things, what is one of your biggest struggles that you have as an artist?
Having enough space to do the creation. Because I feel like about a third of the creation is empty, just like thinking time, and like having enough sparseness or enough room in my life to let the ideas come to me and let the connections come to me. And then a third of the creation time is actually sitting down and writing the thing. And a third of it is going back to it and editing, which is all three of which are kind of different states of creating and different states of mind that I have to be in. Because, you know, the editor's mind is very different than the writer's mind and different than the kind of brainstormer's mind.
Yes.
And so I don't always get enough of one of the three of those, if not all three. Especially when, you know, I used to, anytime I had spare minutes to myself, waiting in line or on my commute or wherever, I'd turn to my journal, where now I turn to my phone and I look at Twitter, or I look at Facebook, or I play Bejeweled or whatever. Right. And I don't just let my mind simmer with its thoughts as much anymore. So that's a big challenge for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with. Well, before we kind of start to wrap up and finish up, I want to make sure that we get to my favorite two little sections, because as I always say, you know, we get really deep on the podcast. We jumped in, you know, right away with some really deep stuff and got through some really deep things. But I always like to go a little superficial as well, because that's always fun too. So this is a section called Pick Your Poison. And what I have are 11 different questions, and I only need you to pick one of them, though. So pick any number 1 through 11 so that we can get to know you on a little bit more superficial level.
9.
Number 9. So who is your favorite Disney character and why?
Oh, gosh.
We can go any cartoon if you'd rather expand a little bit, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can distinguish the Disney from the other folks.
Fair enough.
I'm really into Zootopia right now.
Ooh,
Did
I haven't
you see that one
watched
yet?
it yet. I haven't.
Oh my God,
watched
it's so
it.
good.
I want to.
So I would probably say one of those folks on Zootopia, maybe like the chief who's a buffalo, just because I relate to his cheesiness, and like he has this secret little moment where he's dancing like gazelle, and anyway, it's great. So
cool.
that's the kind of chief. That's the chief that I like.
I love it.
Something like that.
All right, and then we've got our this or that section, where this is kind of our quick fire round. I have 2 options for you, and I'm just basically going to throw them at you, and you pick whichever one you prefer.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, and I always say that you can interpret these any way you want. All right, so there's no right or wrong interpretation.
Okay.
Ready? Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
No. Starbucks?
Maybe, if you had to pick one.
I guess. Yeah, if they were right next to each other, that's the one I would go into.
Gotcha. City or country?
Man, these are hard.
I know. I do it on purpose.
I'm going to say city.
Okay. Movies or TV shows?
TV shows, but only the good ones.
A lot of them are good these days, though. I will say it's like in the golden age. Yeah,
they're great. Like way better than movies right now because they go on forever and ever.
It's true. Now, I'm not sure if you are familiar with any burlesque performers, but I always ask Dita Von Teese or Dirty Martini.
Oh, Dita, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
How about a dirty martini or a pint of beer?
A dirty martini.
Day or night?
Formerly night, maybe future day.
Harry Potter or Star Wars?
Ooh.
I know.
I'm really impressed with the recent Star Wars. I'm going to have to go with Star Wars. I didn't see the Rogue One yet.
You haven't seen Rogue One yet? I saw it. I'm such a geek. I literally saw it 3 times opening weekend. I'm ridiculous.
Stop it. Oh, I admire that in you very much. I wish I'd stolen at least one of those times.
Yeah. To be fair, it was mostly because just like different people wanted to go. You know, it wasn't, I mean, I did like it, but it wasn't that I was just like, I have to see it again. It was more just like, they're like, you want to go? I'm like, yeah, I'll see it again. Why not?
That's amazing. I will see it soon, I'm sure.
You should. It's very good. How about top or bottom?
Top.
That's awesome.
That's not a hard one.
Like, that's easy. Mountains or ocean?
Ooh, I think mountains. That's tough too. I grew up right on the water, right next to the mountains, and so I don't like to choose. These are hard.
I know.
Velvet, these are hard.
I know. That's what I'm here for. I gotta make us
that's
think.
the point.
That's the point. What about classic or neo burlesque?
I think classic. I've seen some good neo, but I think classic.
There's something about the classic showgirls, the Dita kind of thing. It's just, it's amazing. I'm so excited. I get to go see Dita in Atlanta in February. I'm so excited.
Yes.
Yay. How about peanut butter or jelly?
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter. Comedy or tragedy?
Tragedy.
Marvel or DC?
Oh, damn. I can never remember which one's which, but one of them is way better.
Well, in my opinion, Marvel is way better.
I think it's Marvel.
That's the one
like
with all
Jessica
the Avengers
Jones
and everything.
Yeah, I think it's Marvel, but I might have to, with an asterisk, that I might have to research that one.
Fair enough. And lastly, sleep or sex?
Ooh, sex, I think, but that's a tough one.
I know. All right. Well, let's go ahead and finish. I wanted to make sure that we have a chance to talk about, do you have anything coming up in the near future that you would like to share with the Burlesque audience, with the Burlesque Stripped Down audience?
Oh, I'd love to. I have a course happening in late January that is about building protocol for the year to come. And it's a way, it's based in DS relationships, right? Dominance and submission relationships. But it's also a way to build 52 kind of intentions and pull one a week and do it for a week for the next year. So it's a really fun little course. It's only 2 weekends and online, completely online. And I will give you the URL so you can put it in the show notes.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll be sure to link that up. And that's actually interesting too, because I know we've been chatting a lot, but I did want to kind of bring up to you as well, because I know from your Instagram that you're a bit of a planner like me, that you like doing these planning. I know you're a bullet journal person, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So I was going to ask if you have, and we don't want to spend too long on this, do you have a couple quick tips that you can give for those of us who are kind of planning, setting these goals for the new year?
Well, I mean, I have things that kind of work for me, but they don't work for everybody. I think that there's this is maybe what I would do. I would say read the recent Gretchen Rubin book called Better Than Before.
I just finished that one. It's
Habits.
So good.
It's really good. I mean, I find her personally fairly annoying, but I think that the theory that she's uncovering about building habits is really valid and really valuable. And it was really good for me to look in it and go like, what habits do I want to develop? Because habits lead to your, habits are intentions manifested. And so if someone says, I want to go to the gym, well, you need a gym habit. If someone says, well, I want to, eat better, well, you need cooking habits or eating habits. And so figuring out like how you personally approach building a new habit into your life is the key to planning and to changing habits. So like for me, I do yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly check, like goal revisions, where I check in with my goals and look at what I'm getting toward. I build like a top 10 list for 2017, and then I'll also build a 100 things to do in 2017 list and periodically go back to those and I'm like, okay, am I doing any of these? What do I need to do now to build toward them so that I get some of these done? And then I review it all too. So, I probably only did 50 of my 2016 100 things, but that's probably 50 more than I would have done otherwise. So
that's true.
I feel productive.
So I take it you are probably are you an obliger then?
Well, I think I bounce around, but I think I'm the both one that she is, where both internally and externally motivated. But but that concept really rocked my world. A couple of my best friends are rebels, and we finally were able to like have conversations about this stuff because they're always going, will you help me with X project? And I'm like, great, let's do it. Sit down. Where's your book? Like, let's plan it out. Right. And they're like, well, now I'm really not going to do it. So
right.
How do I help you?
That's funny. Yeah.
So we finally are like, okay, it's not just you're not just lazy. You like have a style here and it actually works for you.
Absolutely.
And we're figuring out how to work with it.
For those of you who haven't read or haven't, I've mentioned it actually a couple times. Funny that you mentioned it, Sinclair. Because
Really?
I've actually talked about this before on the podcast, because the 4 tendencies are what the no, not the achiever, the upholder. That's the one. The upholder.
That's the one. Upholder, obliger.
Yes. Questioner and
rebel.
Mm-hmm. And actually, that's what I meant to ask you if you were, because you sound like a good upholder, right? Like doing your own goals and you're like with internal. Me, I actually have decided, I thought I was an obliger at first, and I think I still am, but I actually think that deep down I'm a bit of a rebel who has just like taken on obliger tendencies in order to function in the world, you know?
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah. And it makes sense that that someone would adapt those in order to function well, because rebels have a lot of difficulty accomplishing things, and you seem also very driven and like work ethic full.
Yeah, it's like I want to do things, but I also like really hate, and I start to resent any deadlines that I have, even whether they're internal or external. I just like, and I like won't do it almost like to make a point, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's kind of part of it. So anyway, all of that to say, I think that's some great advice for anybody, starting 2017. Go ahead and pick up Better Than Before, Gretchen Rubin's book, and kind of get into that. And then, like you said, there's different ways to kind of go about your goals depending on which tendency you identify with the most.
Right.
Cool. All right, I guess we have to wrap up because I'm sure we could talk for a long time, but
let's just go have martinis and hang out, because I think that is easier than going, oh no, we only have an hour.
I know. Let's make that happen. Why don't you come to Orlando? That'll be great. It'll be okay. It's warm here. It's like 75, 80 degrees.
Oh, wow.
It's great.
We actually had frost this morning because it froze last night.
Really?
It's been chilly. I'm in California.
Where in California are you again?
In Oakland, in the Bay Area.
In Oakland. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, I will look you up when I next time I'm in Florida for sure.
Please do. So until we get you back, and maybe I'll record our conversation over martinis sometime, because I'm sure that'll be hilarious. But until that happens, what's the best way? We've mentioned a few different links, but what is kind of the best way to keep up with you, to get in touch with you if we want to know more?
Well, I mean, the best way to follow my writing, really follow the writing, is through the patreon.com/Mr. Sexsmith, which is Mr. Sexsmith.
Okay.
But Twitter is also great. I'm there a lot, and sugarbutch.net is my big archive.
All right.
Of the 10 years. But I'll send you a bunch of things so you can put them in the notes, and I've been taking notes too on what we've been talking about, so I'll send on the links.
That's perfect. So everybody, yes, I will have all of the things, all of the fun interwebs stuff will be at burlesquestripdown.com/Sinclair. Again, that's SINCLAIR. So you can find out all that more, and you can also email us. I'm at Velvet at Burlesque Stripdown. Sinclair, do you have an email address that you like to get emails, or is it more through Twitter?
Email's fine, Sinclair at sugarbutch.net. But it also is a black hole of doom on occasion. So it's better to do other things sometimes. But if someone wants to get in touch with me, please do.
Yeah, I just always like to throw that out there as a way in case people want to, have kind of a confidential, comment on the episode, or say that, you agree or disagree, or, anything that you want to kind of continue the conversation. That's also another way to do it. We also have a comment section on our show notes page. So lots of different ways that you can get in touch. So don't worry, it's out there, thanks to the interwebs and the wonderful things that are there. So Sinclair, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been a fantastic conversation. Went a totally different way than I expected, but that's what I love about podcasting and about this show, is that we can just kind of go with what comes up, and it's wonderful. So do you have anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I think that's it, that we covered so many interesting things today.
We sure did. I love it.
It was great to talk to you again. I'm so glad we got to do that.
Me too. Thank you again so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
And there you have it, my friends and lovers. Sinclair Sexsmith. Not too shabby, eh? As you heard, we definitely went off on some interesting things. I never would have expected that we'd talk about health as a spiritual practice, or our personal food allergies, or any of these things. But that's what I love about this show, is that we just let the conversation go wherever it takes us. And I believe that there's definitely things, a lot of gems in there. So hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. As I said, this is one that I enjoyed just as much, or even more so maybe, when I was editing it, as when we initially had the conversation. As a little side note, I did in fact see Zootopia since we had our conversation, and it is phenomenal. So if you have not seen it, go out and see it. I still think maybe I liked Inside Out a little bit better, just because I was so blown away with Inside Out. But they're definitely like on the same page as far as being entertaining and fun, cartoon stories that have so much depth, really, and so much commentary about the world, and some great characters in it. So if you haven't seen it, you should definitely do that. As I mentioned, you can check out all of the links from this, as well as some quotes. As well, I'm going to add in some quotes from the Sex Down South conference, which is where I heard Sinclair, and their keynote speech. And you'll get all of those on the show notes page for this episode, which is at burlesquestrippeddown.com/Sinclair, spelled SINCLAIR. And you'll be able to see that. And that way you can kind of get in touch with them. You can read all of their massive bodies of work, support them on Patreon as well as, burlesquestrippeddown.com/support. You can support us and our show as well. You can do all the things, people, all of them, everyone. Coming up over the next few weeks, I do have interviews in the pipeline with Onyx Keisha, who is a filmmaker, an erotic filmmaker and an actress out of Atlanta. I've got interviews with Miss D20 out of Vancouver and with the awesome Dr. Liz, who has all sorts of amazing things to say. We're also working on an interview with one or two of the authors of a very popular book that's out there that deals with ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. I'm just going to tease that right now. That's kind of in the works. We're still scheduling that out. But we've got lots still going on. I hope it's okay with everybody. I am still rocking and rolling with this season of sex. I told you guys it was going to last as long as I wanted it to, and it sure is, because it is just so much fun. Make sure that you are getting caught up on all of the past interviews that we've had, of course, last week with Tyone Morgan and many before that as well. So those are all linked up over on burlesquestrippeddown.com. All right, my friends. I hope that you are having a fantastic January so far. Hope that it's warm where you are. See, that's funny for me to say because I'm in Florida. It's just like I'm teasing you a little bit because it's not bad here. Hey, I had to wear a sweatshirt today. It wasn't too great, like you do. All right, friends. Well, I will see you next time here on Burlesque Stripped Down with lots of love. This is Velvet Eau Claire and reminding you to stay sexy.